Welcome to class, everyone. Let's jump right into today's explainer, where we're going to dive into a high-stakes exam review of one of literature's absolute most famous encounters, Ulysses and the Cyclops. I am so glad you're joining me for this session, because today we aren't just, reading a myth. We're breaking down a literal, tactical masterclass in survival. We're going to dissect the precise plot points and the character motivations that make this story so enduring. So grab your notebooks, get comfortable, because we have a lot of really fascinating ground to cover. But before we get into the timeline and the action, I really want you to keep this central essay question right in the back of your mind as we analyze our hero's choices today. Is deceit justified if it saves your life? Because as you'll see, Ulysses operates in a deeply, deeply gray moral area. We're going to examine that really fine line between brilliant intellect and outright, unapologetic deception. So, here's our syllabus for today's review session. We'll start with the post-war context, journey inside Polyphemus's cave, analyze the deadly trap, break down the famous nobody deception, detail the blinding and escape, and finally, we'll tackle those tricky moral implications. Let's start right off with Section 1, the post-war journey context. Okay, to really understand exactly how the king of Ithaca ended up stranded on an island of monsters in the first place, you've got to understand this key term, ploy, a cunning plan. Now, Ulysses is already famous for using a ploy to end a grueling 10-year war against the Trojans, which, ultimately helped restore Helen to Menelaus. And this brilliantly illustrates his core character trait. It establishes him as a master of brains over brawn right from the very start of his journey. When brute force fails, Ulysses relies on his cunning. So, the victory at Troy wasn't the end of his struggles. Far from it, actually. The gods heavily favored the Trojans and threw just massive hurdles at Ulysses and his men to keep them from returning home to their wives and children. We're talking storm winds, violent seas, nymphs, monsters, and witches casting evil spells. It's just one thing after another. So by the time they anchor at the island of the Cyclops, which is a race of terrible round-eyed giants, they are running dangerously short on food and are thoroughly bone-tired exhausted. Moving on to Section 2, inside Polyphemus's cave. Taking 12 of his men, our overly curious hero explores the island in search of supplies and walks right into a truly fascinating study of contrasts. You'll want to take notes on this character profile comparison. Ulysses is driven by intellect, a natural love for exploring new things, and a very strict need for survival. Contrast that with Polyphemus, the Cyclops. His dark cave basically represents brute, untamed nature. When Ulysses and his men enter, they find it heavily stocked, baskets just heaped with cheese, pens of lambs separated into 3 folds, and huge pails full of whey. The men, starving, eat as much cheese as they can. It's this profound clash between civilized desperation and monstrous hoarding. Now, pay close attention to this specific number from the text, 24. At the fall of the sun, Polyphemus actually returns, throwing down a huge bundle of wood and absolutely terrifying the men. And the power dynamic immediately shifts when he traps them. How? He closes the mouth of the cave with a rock so unbelievably massive that 24 four-wheeled wagons could not have moved it. Class, underline this detail in your notes. This rock makes physical escape literally impossible. It forces Ulysses to rely entirely on his intellect. Which brings us to Section 3, the monster's deadly trap. Now the exam review gets really intense. Inside the cave, the fire is lit, the giant finally spots them, and his harsh, rumbling voice fills the cave. Ulysses, ever the strategist, tries to use diplomacy. He claims they're from Agamemnon's Greek army, driven off course by contrary winds, and politely asked to be treated as guests. But Polyphemus responds with this incredibly chilling quote, proving he doesn't care at all about the traditional laws of hospitality or any fear of the gods. And pay close attention to the second half of his response. He is immediately probing for a tactical advantage, trying to find out where their ships are anchored. Sensing the trick right away, Ulysses tells a bold-faced lie. He claims the ships are entirely destroyed. So the crucial point here is that Ulysses makes a vital strategic choice to protect the rest of his crew that are still waiting outside. And, well, it's a very good thing he did, because immediately after this, the monster captures 2 of Ulysses' men and just eats them for dinner without saying another word. The stakes are now completely life and death. Section 4, the nobody deception. This brings us to the absolute most famous tactical masterstroke of the text, where Ulysses must use pure deception to survive the night and plan an escape. After his gruesome dinner, the giant asks for his name. by giving the monster this wonderful, incredibly strong wine they had carried with them, and offering this totally fake name, Nobody. Ulysses perfectly sets up a linguistic trap of his own. It's a brilliant, brilliant counterploy to the giant's physical trap of the boulder. And just consider the sheer arrogance of Polyphemus on full display here. Drunk and feeling happy from the wine, he offers Ulysses a deeply twisted favor. He promises to eat nobody last. He fully believes he is in total control of the situation right before he falls fast asleep. It's a very dark moment, obviously, but it provides the precise window of opportunity Ulysses so desperately needs.
Section 5. Blinding and the Escape.
With that massive rock still blocking the door, simply killing the giant in his sleep just isn't an option. If the giant dies, they are entombed forever, right? So Ulysses has to engineer a brilliant, if somewhat gruesome, procedure. Definitely memorize these tactical steps for your review. Ulysses' brain is working quickly. He finds a club of green olive wood lying in the cave. He has his men sharpen one end, he hardens the tip in the fire, and while the monster is fast asleep, they thrust it directly into his big round eye. It shows exactly how Ulysses transforms a simple, everyday piece of wood into the ultimate instrument of survival.
The blinded monster yells for help, and his cries echo out to the other Cyclopses outside. When they run over and ask who is hurting him, Polyphemus yells, "Nobody is killing me!" And this brilliantly illustrates the payoff of Ulysses' earlier deception. The other monsters naturally conclude that if nobody is hurting him, he must be completely fine, and they simply leave him writhing in pain. The linguistic trap snaps shut perfectly. But, they still have to actually get out of the cave. Patient and calculating as always, Ulysses outsmarts the blinded giant one last time. In the morning, the Cyclops has to roll back the rock to let his sheep out to graze. So Ulysses fastens his men underneath the sheep, and he ties himself right under the big ram. The blinded Polyphemus touches each sheep on the top just to ensure no one is riding them out, checking in vain. Hiding right in plain sight underneath the flock, Ulysses and his surviving men secure their freedom. And finally, Section 6, Final Exam, Moral Implications. Before we dismiss the class today, we really have to look past the physical action and analyze the deeper philosophy of this survival story. We've seen the mechanics of the escape, sure, but what does it say about our hero? I leave you with this final essay prompt to debate on your own time. A question that scholars have literally argued over for centuries. Was Ulysses' deception of the Cyclops a triumph of intellect or a moral failure? I mean, he lied about his ships, he lied about his name, and he blinded a living creature in its sleep. And yet, it was the only possible way to save his crew from a monster who literally ate them for dinner. So, in the brutal world of monsters, does the end always justify the deceitful means? Think critically about how you would grade Ulysses on his moral compass. Thank you so much for joining me for this masterclass on the Explainer. Keep studying, and I will see you in the next session.